Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Expert, a web series designed to provide you with practical information about business and finance. I am your host, Nicole Pride. So today we celebrate the federal holiday, Juneteenth National Independence Day, which most of us refer to simply as Juneteenth. The holiday commemorates a pivotal moment in American history, not just Black history, but American history. We're talking about the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. Juneteenth is more than just a celebration of freedom. It is a powerful reminder of the ongoing journey towards equality and economic empowerment. And so to help us explore the significance and relevance of Juneteenth is none other than the founder of the D-Free movement, Dr. DeForest B. Soaries Jr. We're so happy to have him here with us today. He has so much to contribute to the discussion. So hopefully we can get it all in today. Dr. Soaries started, as an activist, as a teenager, and never looked back. He's also former Secretary of State of New Jersey and pastor emeritus of First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens, where he faithfully served for 31 years. And jokingly, he may tell you down to the hour of when he retired. But he's helping us to move forward with our D-Free goals and helping people just like you become financially free. And that means eliminating your debt and building your wealth. So we are so happy to have this discussion today. Welcome.
Well, happy Juneteenth, first of all.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Nicole, I'm so proud of you. I always remind people that I knew you when you were a teenager. That's when we met. And now you are a mother, you are a leader, you're a wife, and I'm just so proud. Your name is Pride. You give me pride. And I'm happy to be with you today. This is a special day. Growing up in New Jersey, I frankly didn't know how special it was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Juneteenth was a kind of Greek sorority, fraternity concoction and excuse to have a party. I was never taught about Juneteenth in New Jersey schools, and not until I was an adult that I realized that Juneteenth was really the celebration of the legal end of enslavement of Africans, extended beyond 1863. When the Emancipation Proclamation took place, but then it wasn't until 1865 that Africans who were enslaved in Texas got word that they had been freed 2.5 years prior.
Listen, I have a confession. So I didn't learn about Juneteenth either until my adult years. And then when I learned about it, I confess, I'm like, why are we celebrating the fact that it took 2 years for all the slaves to realize that they were free? And so it took me a moment to get over that. I was actually angry about the holiday. Yeah.
Well, it can make you angry, which is why later on we'll talk about Opal Lee. I think Opal Lee, who was the primary person responsible for urging the Congress and the White House to make Juneteenth a national holiday. Opal Lee walked from Texas to Washington, D.C. in her 90s, which is just a preposterous thought for me at any age. But what's so significant to me about Opal Lee is that when she was a teenager living in Texas, an angry mob of white racists burned down her house on Juneteenth. Her family had moved into a new house, and just a few weeks later, they were burned out of their house because the people didn't want them in that neighborhood. And so Juneteenth for her could be just an anniversary of bitterness and pain, and could be a trigger for anger. Whereas for her, Juneteenth is a time to celebrate, to promote love, to bring people together. For the last 2 years, I actually walked with her. She walks on Juneteenth, as she's probably doing right this minute, in Fort Worth, Texas. She walks 2.5 miles to commemorate the 2.5 years that it took for the Black people in Galveston, Texas, to get word from General Granger. And she walks in 100-degree weather, 2.5 miles. And she's promoting love and peace and harmony. And she's asking young people to commit themselves to making America a better place. So it has become rather personal for me. I've appeared with Opal Lee on stage. I've participated in documentary video projects about Opal Lee. So I've become a real admirer of Juneteenth. I did not want Juneteenth to become a holiday once I learned about it. I was
Mm,
afraid that it would become so commercialized, much like Martin Luther King's birthday has
mhm.
become overly commercialized, much like every holiday. I mean, in America, every holiday has become subordinated in its meaning to the commercialization of it. And
Right. A reason to
Thanksgiving
sell
is
stuff,
about
right?
shopping, and yeah, it's just it's really embarrassing. Our culture is consumed by commercialism to the point where almost nothing has retained its original meaning. So I was concerned, and I'm still a bit concerned. However, I do think the fact of 1619 to 1865, the enslavement of Africans against their will, has got to be a part of the American narrative.
It
The
has to
fact
be.
that the fact that black people, listen, in 1865 there were 4 million black people in this country, and the fact that we stayed here, we hung around. You know, if you look at the biblical text and refer to uh, captivity and slavery, the children of Israel were in Egypt 400 years, and after 400 years they left Egypt. They were not hanging around. God sent
Mhm.
Moses. Moses challenged Pharaoh, and the whole tribe just left to be who God had made them to be. The same thing is true in the Babylonian captivity in 587 BC, when the Babylonians seized Jerusalem and took the captives, you know, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel, into Babylon. When the Persian king Cyrus emerged, he let them go back home. So there was a great movement. You know, Marcus Garvey and others really
Mhm.
advocated going back to Africa. In fact, the African nation of Liberia was formed by freed Africans who left America to go back to Africa and
Right.
form the country of Liberia. So the fact that so many decided, no, we're not leaving. We've invested a lot in this country. We built its economy. You know, cotton was the commodity that made Americans the greatest economy in the world
Mhm.
because black people picked cotton, and of course weren't paid for picking that cotton. And so after the freedom from slavery, black people had two priorities. Priority number one was to reconnect with family.
Mhm.
During enslavement, mothers and fathers and children were separated, sold to the highest buyer, and upon hearing that they had freedom, the first priority was families. That's why in the South, unlike the North, in the South, the family reunion was then and still is now a major event. I mean, you've got family reunions with 200 and 300 people, and it all started with Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Juneteenth became the launching pad for Black family reunions. And then the second priority after uh, Juneteenth was education. And so you go to Raleigh, North Carolina, and Shaw University being one of the first historically Black colleges to be founded in 1865, right after Juneteenth. And so, you know, we are the inheritors of this rich legacy. And not only should Black people celebrate it, but America should first be taught what Juneteenth is, and then understand the dynamics of Juneteenth, be acceptable of the challenge of the lingering effects of slavery. My mother's grandmother was a slave. My mother's grandmother.
Mhm.
And you've heard me talk countless numbers of times about my grandmothers. Well, when my
Mhm.
mother talks about her grandmother, she's talking about someone who was enslaved, which
Mhm.
means that we're not as far away from
No, we're
the
not.
enslavement of our people as some people would have us think. So it's wonderful to be with you. I'm glad it's a holiday. I'm hoping America will rise above its fear of 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 children being hurt by the history that is well documented. And I think America should be able to take pride in the fact that we had this blemish on our development called slavery, but we overcame it. We are here now with college degrees, we own businesses, and while not enough Black people are enjoying the full benefits of American opportunity, so many of us are, despite our history, and that's what Juneteenth helps us recognize.
Yeah, so thank you for that historical context because it really is so complex. And it's just so amazing where we are today, given the remnants of slavery, right? And so we're still experiencing some of the injustices, some of the structural um, uh, policies in place, some of the structural infrastructure in place that um, made it hard for us to enjoy the full rights and benefits as citizens here in the US. But I think one interesting thing that makes it super complex, like you mentioned, we didn't leave, we stayed. And so, in order for America to move forward, there needs to be like some level of forgiveness, right? And that's really hard when you still see remnants today. And
Yeah.
then also, and then when you have folks that, not to get too political, but we are already, erasing history, rewriting history.
Yeah.
So it's really tough. And so, okay, we recognize Juneteenth, we celebrate the meaning of freedom. And how is it relevant today when we're talking about economic empowerment? What can we learn from Juneteenth, or how can we be inspired by Juneteenth to move forward toward economic empowerment?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because when we look at the disparities that exist today, and I'll just focus on race, although race is not the only disparity that exists from an economic perspective. You have gender disparities, you have age disparities, you have geographical disparities. But let's look at race for a moment. 35% of African Americans either have a zero net worth or negative net worth. That means 1 out of 3 Black people are broke, structurally broke, not just broke because they don't have money in their pockets, broke because their debt exceeds their assets. Their liabilities exceed their assets. 54% of Black people are either unbanked, which means they don't have a bank account at all, or they're underbanked. 54%. That breaks down to 21% of Black people, 1 out of 5, have no bank account. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have no bank account, that means that if you get a check, you have to cash it at the check cashing joint that charges high fees. If you need a loan, you have to borrow from a pawn shop or a payday lender or cash for gold. And these are expensive, predatory financial schemes. We call them alternative financial services. 1 out of 5 Black people in 2024. And then the other 13, so it's 21% have no bank accounts. 13% are what we call underbanked. They have bank accounts, but they're not using their bank accounts regularly to transact their day-to-day business. And so when you look at it, that means over half of Black America is on the margin of the American economy. So yes, we have Black millionaires, we have Black billionaires, but when we look at the bottom third of Black America, you have to ask yourself the question, what happened? How is this still true in 2024? So the only way to understand the challenge, you have to go back to the origin. So in 1866, you have Juneteenth, and right after the emancipation, the first move that happened was people who were formerly enslaved were actually given land. They worked the land. They were promised 40 acres and a mule. And throughout the South, mainly, they were given land. And the Reconstruction period started. By 1877, all that was over. In fact, most of the land that had been given to people who were formerly enslaved was taken from them and given back to the slave owners.
Right.
So the people who owned slaves, the people who profited from chattel slavery, these were the ones who were given reparations because slavery had ended. Right. So that injustice was horrific. And then you roll history forward and you look at the intimidation, you look at lynching, you look at the lack of education, you look at the systems that continue to persist in holding down those who are the descendants of Africans. And in large measure, it was economic. It was enforced by politics, to your previous point, in public policies. But the root cause was that there was a lack of appreciation for the core humanity of Black people. So when we talk about equal rights, we're not just talking about the right to drink from a water fountain, or the right to ride on the front of the bus, or the right to live in any neighborhood we want. The real right that is our struggle is the right to be respected as a full human being. The human dignity of Black people was undermined, which is why, see, if you can dehumanize someone, then you can deny them rights and not feel that it's an injustice, because after all, justice is only deserved by people who are human.
Right.
So to the extent that we are dehumanized, and the media and other public policies have persisted in promoting images and policies that at their core are defined by Black people not being fully human. That's why a police officer can kill an unarmed Black man at point blank range and be deemed having protected himself, even if there was no weapon involved, because the presence is like, listen, we, right near our house, there's a little pond, and there's a sign outside the pond that says, beware of alligators, right? So the alligator is inherently an enemy. You don't invite that. If we see and it might be a friendly alligator, it might be, but beware of alligators, because it's not human. And unfortunately, the culture and the education and the lifestyle of too many Americans sees Black people the way we in our neighborhood see alligators. Beware of the Black people. And listen, I heard a statistic the other day. It was startling and true. 80% of white people in America have 100% white friends and associates. So 80% of the white people in America only know white people.
Mm.
So they only know Black people through television and movies and MTV and YouTube. And as long as that's true, it's a challenge for the average white person who has been brought up to believe that they should beware of the alligators. It's hard for them to embrace the idea that we are exactly as human as they are.
Dr. Stories, these are weighty topics. I'm feeling heavy right now. So we need to give our viewers some encouragement, because, one of the things is you can't legislate morality. You can't legislate, people's ability to empathize with others. And so what do we do today? We can't make folks say that you are human and we're on the same level. So from an economic empowerment standpoint, and I heard you too, right? So knowing the history is half the battle right there, right? Just knowing the history is very important, so we don't repeat the history, so that we can appreciate all that was accomplished. But from an economic empowerment move, where does that leave us today?
Good. Yeah. So I started with the dehumanization effect of this culture and society on Black people. The only thing worse, Nicole, than someone dehumanizing you is when you dehumanize yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to the extent that we're talking about economic freedom, our approach to economic freedom starts with helping people appreciate their own value, their own worth. To separate, for instance, to separate my identity from my possessions. So when we talk about economic freedom, it's more than just the attainment of things or passing a financial literacy test. It's understanding that you are not your possessions, that you don't need to buy a high-priced car to have significance. So we talk about three types of spending as a foundational approach to economic freedom. First, we need to avoid compensatory spending where we are compensating for some lack, some emotional lack that we have, and using money to buy significance. And so you'll find in many instances, people who just don't feel like they are complete, don't feel that they are somebody, as it were, who will use things like I used to use things. I would buy things to make me feel like I'm a more significant person.
Right.
And that's one of the pitfalls that we're exposed to as a formerly oppressed people. When you've been oppressed, when society basically says you're nobody, when the Supreme Court has a ruling, like in the Dred Scott case, that a black person has no rights that a white person needs to acknowledge, right? When institutions are able to subjugate you and discriminate against you, what can happen is you begin feeling inside, you begin feeling like maybe there's something wrong with you. It's like domestic violence. Often women who are the victims of domestic violence end up feeling like it's their fault. So then you do things to compensate for the affirmation you're not getting, and it has significant economic outcomes, and that's the first level. Then the second is not compensatory spending. It's conspicuous consumption. That's what the sociologists called it in the 1950s, where you are buying things for status. So in lieu of, or as a substitute for the status that we should get in society, we buy things to create our own status. And so we buy designer labels and we spend more money than we have to look important. And then we talk about confused spending, which is just stupid, meaning we don't have the facts, we don't have the information, the education to properly assess why we would spend $8 for an item over here, which half a mile away only costs $5. So that's where we start. Now, if you don't start there, then you're ignoring, again, what happened after 1866. You're ignoring the lingering effects of dehumanization. That's why in D-Free, we start with, when we say get started, we start with self-assessment and not financial planning. Because once I do this self-assessment, and once I realize I don't need designer clothes to be important, I don't need a BMW if I can only afford a Toyota, that once I'm freed from that emotional, psychological, spiritual bondage, then I can build a financial future that's sustainable.
Yeah. So, the phrase that we often use, right, is retail therapy, right? We had a show recently where we looked into franchising, and the businesses that were outpacing the economy, that were growing, were the franchises that were focused on food and the franchises that were focused on wellness. And I said, everyone's so stressed out. They're feeling so bad about themselves. They're either eating or they're going to a massage therapist to feel better. And it's the same thing with retail, right? People are just purchasing to kind of soothe the pain that they're feeling. And so I think that's so excellent about the D-Free curriculum, starting with the foundation of understanding who you are, understanding your spending patterns so that you can change them. It's awesome. And I should remind everyone, too, that we're part of the Ask the Expert D-Free movement is empowered by Prudential, who are our sponsors. And you can start today by speaking with an advisor, a certified financial advisor, for free. And so at the link that'll show up on the screen, you can go there and schedule an appointment today to be able to speak with someone to come up with a strategy to help you move forward financially.
And let me say a word about that. I'll say two words. Number one, I have a financial advisor now. Actually, I have three, but the main financial advisor is my retirement advisor. And financial advisors.
Are you able to share what the other two are?
Well, one is at Prudential, and he is an investment advisor. Okay. And then I have an insurance advisor. So I have three financial advisors. So actually I have 4 because I have a tax person who is also my tax advisor. So it- talking to a financial professional is important. I basically am at the point where I make my own investment decisions. I am on a trajectory that I have confidence in. I have enough money now where I don't need any more income for the rest of my life. So I've got all that covered. However, there are rules, regulations, and laws that change all the time. And financial professionals keep up with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to talk to them because there are things that were true about my finances in my life 10 years ago that are no longer true. And I don't study these intricate changes. I don't follow the laws and the regulations. I mean, just one small example. Um, um, when you reach a certain age, the government requires that you take a certain amount of your retirement money, if it's in a certain kind of account, that you do a withdrawal. It's called a required minimum distribution at a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have changed the age, over the last few years. Well, I don't keep up with that, but my financial professional keeps up with that.
Right.
So I talk to my financial advisor to get up to date on things that they are, because they're licensed, they keep up with. They read the bulletins, they attend workshops and seminars, and they can bring that information back to your clients. So that's one great reason to talk to a professional, even if you think you have it all together. Second thing I want to say is that, as you know, based on the Supreme Court case that ended affirmative action in college admissions, a lot of corporations have begun dismantling their diversity, equity, and inclusion departments. They don't want anything associated with color or with gender. And Prudential has not pulled back at all. In fact, Prudential has ramped up its efforts to help Black America, and they have a special initiative called Blueprints to Black Wealth. And so Prudential is standing in the face of this onslaught of anti-DEI activities, and Prudential has dug in deep. Prudential is coming with us. Prudential is going to the Zeta Phi Beta convention with us in next month. They're working to deepen their ties with Delta Sigma Theta sorority. They work with the National Convention. So Prudential is not intimidated by this anti-Black, anti-DEI spirit. And they have said to us, whoever D-Free sends us, our professionals will meet with them for free.
That's excellent, because there is this growing movement, and this is a strong force. It's a strong force. And I just want to have everybody recognize. So we thank you for sharing. I think that's what makes D-Free so unique. So you're sharing your tidbits about what you do to be successful. A lot of people aren't willing to do that. And so I'm hoping people are taking notes. You have your different financial advisors and the importance of a financial advisor to helping build your wealth. So, as you mentioned, there's this force that's out there moving against diversity and inclusion. People are putting formal, whether it's governmental policies, but in the private sector, there are policies to restrict access. This is what we're talking about. So, what is it that you encourage folks to do today if they wanted to be more involved in giving more access to our community? Would you recommend being more involved in government, in their local politics, just where they are on the job themselves and what change that they can make? Or is it, just make sure that you're educating your family so that they are aware, make conscious choices and decisions? What can people do today?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in two things in response to your question. Thing number one is education. I think, starting with the family, going out to the community, churches, organizations, into schools, we just need more education. We live in an age of major distractions. And now we have multiple hundreds of TV stations. We've got social media. We've got all kinds of distractions that aren't necessarily geared towards keeping us up to date with the facts and sharing with us a perspective on our history.
Yeah,
And so
misinformation, even.
I just think education is important. My father was a school teacher and administrator. My mother, certified teacher. My mentor, Sam Proctor, was a professor at the Rutgers Graduate School of Education. I just believe in education because education can take you a long way towards understanding other people, even if you disagree with them. Education can help open your eyes to new possibilities. And yes, education can help you expand your awareness of opportunities that can help impact your economic reality. And then, of course, spiritual authenticity. I just think we have to, as the old folk would say, we got to get back with God. I mean, we have allowed religion to become an adjunct to our lives, when in fact the way we survived from 1619 to 1866 was we had a strong, undeniable, unshakable belief in God. That our faith in God, our trust in God, our reliance on God, and our belief in godly principles, our morality came from Scripture and came from God's revealed word. And without a spiritual foundation, even with education, you will give up. The suicide rate among young Black men is rising.
It's disturbing.
In a time when opportunity is greater than it's ever been.
Right.
So we our forebears, they had enough spiritual strength to withstand the brutality. Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921, they burned down the whole Black neighborhood, but we never gave up. And the unwillingness to give up is directly related to the extent to which we have a strong, authentic spiritual foundation.
Mm-hmm. That's the word. And I was even challenged recently with the word priority. So I often say I have a lot of priorities, and these are my top priorities.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes God is up there with all the other priorities, but really God being the priority, the thing, and everything else.
Well, in the Ten Commandments, when God gave Moses the standards for morality, he started with, have no other gods before me. In other words, nothing, no person, no possession, no pursuit should be the priority, but God should be the priority. And when God is the priority, then everything flows from a desire to obey and please God. So the God talk, I believe, has to turn into a kind of God walk, where we really are focused on the reality of who God is and what our obligation to God really is. When we do that, then we can have strong families, strong communities, real churches, and we can enjoy prosperity God's way and not prosperity in an ungodly way.
Well, that's an excellent note, I think, to seal this conversation. I do remember one of your big themes for many years of your ministry was put faith in action, right? So it shows up in different areas of your life when you're putting those principles into action. So that's awesome. And so you did touch upon Opal Lee a little earlier as would we say the mother of the Juneteenth movement in recent years?
Grandmother. I think we call it grandmother.
Yeah. Grandmother.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, grandmother beginning her walk at age 89. So we have a wonderful movie for our viewers today, or short video, I should say, for our viewers today to watch. And we'd like to end today's segment on that note. So stick around. It'll put a lot of this in context for you, and you'll be inspired to see what one woman was able to do in her 80s into 90s. And there's just no way after watching this, you don't feel empowered and encouraged. So we thank you today, Dr. Stories, for giving us the historical context and then also giving us a charge today to educate ourselves, to educate our families, and to remember to keep God first and put our faith in action. So there you have it, folks. There's another episode we've just done. We hope that you were able to get some tidbits that you're able to apply to your lives. And there you have it. Same time, next place, meet us here for Ask the Expert.
Are we going to see Oprah Lee now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Great.
At 96 years old, Opal Lee
walking an astonishing 1,400 miles to Washington, D.C.
Opal Lee is leading her annual walk right now.
Juneteenth is America's newest federal holiday, and it's a unique holiday. It's a brilliant display of both summarizing a painful past and catalyzing a powerful future. What's up for the word? What happens on Juneteenth, led and envisioned by Opal Lee, is a march that advocates the principles that America was founded on.
More people need to be aware of the significance of Juneteenth. And I can't say it enough that it means freedom, but more has to be done.
If a woman in her 90s could still continue celebrating on the very day that her house was burned down and inviting other people to celebrate the hope for America, if she can do it, then we all can do it.
I just hope somebody hears me when I say this. We can get so much more done together than apart. And it's up to you.
This is Stand Together Presents. Stories, ideas, and advice from changemakers tackling our biggest challenges.
If you grew up in New Jersey like I did, most of us didn't know what Juneteenth was. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the document known as the Emancipation Proclamation, but it took 2.5 years for the enslaved in Texas to be told that they, in fact, were free. And thus, people in Texas have celebrated Juneteenth every year since 1866. But it took Opal Lee to take the celebration and expand it into a movement that resulted in the holiday.
Thank you again, Miss Opal.
I'm appreciative that you young people are taking the time. When I was a kid, we'd go to the fairground for Juneteenth and we would have so much fun. There'd be music and speeches. There'd be games and food and food and food. But when we moved to Fort Worth, not so much.
I think the most profound aspect of Opal Lee's leadership and testimony is that when she was 12 years old, white racists burned down her family home on Juneteenth.
People started gathering, and the police couldn't control the mob. Those people towed that place asunder. They pulled the furniture out and burned it.
And rather than using Juneteenth as an annual reminder of how evil those people were, she's taken that very date and used it to invite people into loving, meaningful, cooperative relationships, to celebrate how far America's come.
I mean, even just the walking from Fort Worth to D.C. on its own is just
ridiculous.
So right now, my grandmother is 96 years old. But at 89, she tells me she wants to walk to D.C. to bring awareness to Juneteenth being a national holiday. And I remember calling my dad and saying, you know, your mother wants to walk to D.C. He says, yeah, I heard. He says, well, you're not going to be able to stop her. I said, okay, I just want to make sure the family wasn't going to come after me.
So you can imagine this old woman pressing for this holiday. She was not a celebrity. This was a bottom-up, grassroots, town-by-town movement
I'm really a little old lady in tennis shoes getting in everybody else's business, and I'm having a good time doing it too. I got up and I walked Fort Worth, Arlington, Little Rock, St. Louis.
We did Atlanta, and then we did South Carolina, North Carolina, and just kept going. And it slowly was getting momentum. At that point, we had 8,000 signatures. For the next 3 weeks, we got up to 80,000 signatures. By the time we delivered the petition to Congress, we had 1.5 million signatures.
The bill is passed.
I tell you, I was humbled. It was joyous.
The Walk for Freedom, led by Opal Lee in Fort Worth, is not a protest movement. It's not a demonstration of what people are against, but it's rather a demonstration of what people are for. We are literally marching to affirm our belief in the founding principles, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
And now that we actually have the holiday and it's on the calendar, it's more about understanding what Juneteenth means, the freedom that it represents.
Freedom for all Americans. That's what Juneteenth means to me.
Because once everybody is free, we're all free.
I am so happy that it is a national holiday. That is way past due.
Hello, young people. We've still got to work. We have so much more to do.
I want to ask you to make yourself a committee of one.
What that really means is take the ownership yourself to make a change, even if there's nobody else around you saying the same thing that you believe in.
We depend so much on the government for our needs when we can do things for ourselves.
I want you to know you can and you must.
Opal Lee is calling people to do what America needs desperately today.
If people can be taught to hate, they can be taught to love. We know people who aren't on the same page we're on. Change their minds.
Not gonna happen in a day. You're gonna have to work at it. And I'm hoping that the walking and talking I do, somebody will listen.
Thank you! Love you! Love you!
Oh, it was fabulous. I enjoyed it. I'm ready for next year.
Stand Together partners with changemakers tackling our biggest challenges. To see more stories, follow our channels. And to learn more about how you can partner with us, go to standtogether.org.